Welcome to the X Shack, episode 7. On this episode, we'll be talking about House of X number 4, written by Jonathan Hickman, featuring art by Pepe Larraz, and colors by Marty Garcia. Warning, spoilers are ahead. Alright, welcome to the X Shack. Come on in, take a seat, and listen to me discuss this week's X book. As you heard from the opening, it's going to be House of X number 4, and I'm just going to say this was an insane issue, so this will be an insane episode. Wow. So in the previous issue, we ended with the X-Men getting ready to board the space station and a lone soldier deciding to blow up the section that they're going to enter. So we pick up and we find out that some of the X-Men have actually died in that explosion. And then we commence with the X-Men deciding that they need to finish this mission. It has to be done. So the remnants of the team go ahead and start trying to disengage the locks to the mother mode head in order to let it float into the sun. They get 2 of those locks done, and then in desperation, one of the scientists decides to go ahead and activate the mother mode ahead of time. And in the process, Mystique gets killed. Jean is blasted off into space in an escape pod. It's left down to Cyclops and Wolverine, and the room that they need to get into is now exposed to space. And so the only way to get in there was for somebody to make that decision to go, and that is Wolverine, who wonders if there is an afterlife. And him and Nightcrawler in this issue have an interesting conversation about Wolverine always wondering where someone like him would go when they finally die. Wolverine does sacrifice himself to get into the room and get to the mother mode. Cyclops is captured in the process, and believing that he is going to be taken prisoner, he finds out that he is gravely mistaken and he is actually killed. We end with Jean, the lone survivor, floating in the escape pod, and she is being attacked by Sentinels. So they have the escape pod and they're on the verge of breaking into that pod, and we just end with Jean trying to fight them off, and Professor X and the rest of the core mutant, I guess we can call them council, on Krakoa, mourning the loss of their comrades. And our last shot is Professor X crying, and we're greeted with the caption, "No more." One of the big things in this issue and the core message being sent throughout it is the genocides that the mutants have faced over the years. And so they kind of talk about the mutant population. It's sprinkled throughout the book, and we hear about, the mutant population before Genosha, which is about 17 million mutants. And then after the attack on Genosha, we also, hear about some of the other major events where a lot of mutants were wiped out. And strangely enough, they also mention Scarlet Witch. If anybody who's read or knows of the House of M arc, you know that Scarlet Witch at one point decimated the mutant population. She pretty much wiped out 90% of the mutant population, which they actually do give you the figures for what the percentage of mutants were on Earth. And with the mutant population before Genosha, it was about 25% of the population on Earth were mutants. Afterwards, we had about 14%, and it's just kind of crazy that that's the decision, is to remind us that one of their own was part of one of the greatest genocides of mutant kind. Now we don't really know where we're going to go from here. We know that in Powers we've been dealing with the mostly dealing with the future and what's taking place in the future, and this kind of seems like what may happen is the idea that getting the information to the past would prevent that future from happening. Something almost like a Days of Future Past, or some time travel stories that we have seen or read before, but we don't know if that actually affected anything. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it should have, because now that the mother mode is destroyed, it can't come online, which means that Nimrod can't be created, which means that the future we've been seeing in Powers shouldn't actually happen. So we're kind of have to see if that is the case with the next issue. One of the other things that we don't really know, and it's been glossed over a little bit up until this point, is in the first issue of House, one of the first things we see is this new Professor X, which I know I've been questioning since the beginning whether this is the actual Professor X. I mean, because he's walking around, and we do see some instances where in later issues he's in the wheelchair and then he's walking again. So we don't really know who or what happened to give him back his ability to walk. But one of the other things is we haven't heard or seen anything else about the pods that the X-Men came out of in the first issue. So I'm just kind of curious whether or not the pods are some kind of cloning tanks to where he can kind of reclone or make duplicates of the X-Men. We also haven't seen Sinister yet, and we know that Sinister is notorious for genetic manipulation, and there's a possibility that, now that I think about it, that could resemble some of the tech that Sinister would use. It's normally kind of organic almost. Still a fun ride. Everything has been amazing up until this point. Even with everyone dying, this felt like an X-Men issue yet again. I was floored reading this and couldn't believe some of the decisions that were made. So I'm really interested to see not only what happens in the next issue of Powers, but also to see what will happen going forward. This is going to be another short episode. Just thoughts on this. This is insane. If you've been enjoying this, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, leave comments about your opinions on what's going on. I would love to hear from you. But until next time, I will see you later.